running for president. There's some really good guys that are good at making speeches and they've got great theories. Well, guess what? John Kasich hasn't been about theories. He's been about reality. He has been about actually real reform. I worked for John Kasich when he was a congressman. That first budget he introduced that ultimately led to a balanced budget, he was taking on a Republican president. He was taking on the establishment. All the people who voted for that budget could have fit in a phone booth. You probably don't know what a phone booth is, do you?
I appreciate that. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here in Mansfield. We are really excited about it. I got the opportunity to bring my daughters with us today. So this is Reese Kasich, Abby Kasich, and my third daughter who lives down the street, Megan. So we've got them traveling with us today, which always makes it fun. I thought I would let you know a little bit about how I met John Kasich, because I get asked that question a lot. How did you meet him and how did you end up in this life of politics? And I was a young lady right out of college working in my first job, and I was working for a public relations firm, and they told me to go out and get photographs of 6 or 7 Ohio officials. And Congressman John Kasich was one of the officials that I needed to go get a photograph of. And he meant nothing to me, nothing more than any of those other officials on my list. But I went, and I remember we laughed and we had a good time. But that's about all I really remember about it, except that when the magazine came out 2 months later, my office phone rang, and it was Congressman John Kasich. And he said, well, I was just calling to tell you that I think that the magazine turned out very nicely. And I thought, none of those other guys called to tell me the magazine turned out nicely. But I didn't think much more of that. And then about a month later, my phone rang again, and it was Congressman John Kasich, and this time he asked me out to lunch. So I called my mother, and I said, Mom, this congressman just asked me out to lunch. And she said, oh, no. She said, first of all, you don't know anything about current affairs. I don't know what you're going to talk about the whole time. You need to go get Newsweek magazine and start reading. And to the day she died, my mother sent me Newsweek magazine at Christmas every year. But the conversation must have gone fine because we've been married 19 years. We have these 2 beautiful 16-year-old daughters. And I couldn't be more proud of the man that John Kasich is. So it worked out well for me, and I hope it worked out well for him. I think he would say yes. I wanted to tell you that I am very proud of John, and for the reasons that Pat so eloquently spoke of. 18 years in Congress, the Budget Committee chairman when they balanced the budget, proving he can work across both sides of the aisle. The Foreign Services experience that he has on the Foreign Service Committee, Armed Services Committee, he has more foreign service experience than any of those other people up there running for president. And he knows how to make sure that our men and women who are in harm's way have the right weapons at the right place in the right time. I'm proud of his time in the private sector where he worked in business, and I enjoyed those years very much. But then he came to me and he said, you know, Ohio's rather in a death spiral, and I think I'm the man that can get in there and fix things and make life better for Ohioans. And I knew that he was because of what I'd seen him do in Washington, and I knew I had to let him run. And thank goodness he ran, because Ohio, as Pat said, is in such a much better place than it was before John Kasich took over. The addition of 400,000 private sector jobs alone on his watch is incredible. And not to mention the fact that he's a man, like Pat said, who really worries about the people living in the shadows in Ohio and wants policies that will bring them up along with the rest of us. And that's the mentally disabled, the working poor, it's the drug addicted. And they need our help, and John Kasich does not let them get left behind. So I'm terribly proud of that. I need your help on Tuesday. I want to see John Kasich become our nominee for the next president of the United States, and I need you to go out there, vote for John Kasich, and show Donald Trump that he can't just march into Ohio and take the state. So with that, I'd like to bring you Ohio Governor John Kasich.
You know, what I want to tell you is this. With your help, I'm not only going to win Ohio, but we're going to win the White House. I'm going to be the next president of the United States. It's great to be with so many of you tonight, and it's the first time I've seen my daughters in a little while, so I got a little hug. Oh, it's crazy out there. You know, people say, well, where are you going? I said, well, I don't know where I was, and I'm not quite sure where I'm going, but I know this. I'm getting there, wherever it is. So thanks for coming tonight, and I just want to take a few minutes to kind of remind you of what we are doing and what we have done in this state. Because we started this whole effort back in 2010, and when I came into Ohio, you might recall, I don't know if you'll remember the numbers, but we had lost 350,000 Ohio jobs. Families, I mean 350,000 families that one day dad or mom walked home into the house, sat with the family and said, I'm out of work. Now I know what that means because, you know, I grew up in a town that was really pretty much like Mansfield. It was a blue-collar Democrat town where if the wind blew the wrong way, people found themselves out of work. And you might recall, I know you've heard this over the years, that my father carried mail on his back. And his father was a coal miner. And I'll tell you something about my grandfather. My grandfather would go down in the mine and he would work all day. And then he would think, I got a pretty good haul here. It's going to be a pretty good day's pay. And you know what they'd tell him? Well, you dug too much peat and not enough coal, you'll get about half of what you thought you were going to get. And my grandfather had no one that he could appeal to. No one that he could say, you know, you're taking advantage of me. You're not treating me fairly. He ended up dying of black lung, and as he was getting older, he was losing his eyesight. But he never lost hope, and he gave an inspiration, a lot of hope to his kids, who grew up, one of whom happened to be my dad. And my father was very involved in the community, the way we all need to be in America today. And when the son scored a touchdown on Friday night, I see St. Pete's has got a, who did I see, was going to have a big football game. Well, when somebody scored a touchdown, my dad would celebrate. When the daughter sang a solo in the choir, my dad would celebrate. And when somebody lost somebody in the family, my dad would cry. And he was involved in what was happening on that mail route that he handled for 29 years. And my mother and father, you know, lost their lives to a drunk driver. And people stood outside that funeral home and told me about how much my dad had meant to them. A really important lesson. My mother, I'm still trying to check this out to make sure it's true, but my mom was one of four. Her mother could barely speak English, and as a kid, we believe she is the only one in the family, two brothers and a sister, and my mom. My mom was the only one to get out of the 8th grade. And she walked across a little footbridge over a railroad track to go get her high school diploma. And she was, by the way, very smart, very opinionated. I like to say she was a radio talk show pioneer. When somebody on the radio would say something, my mother would yell at the radio. And it's just the way that it was and how we grew up. But what was most important is I learned in that community what it meant to have work, what it really meant to have a job. That's what it was really about. And when we'd play ball, you know, we'd go up to the schoolyard and my buddies would come up and I could tell something was wrong. And when I reflect back, it was because somebody had lost a job. And they would turn around and, you know, a couple weeks later, maybe a month later, they'd be happy. And you know what it was? Somebody had found the job, sir. And we began to realize how important it was to be able to work, to be able to live our God-given purpose. So all of my political career, it's always been to fight, frankly, for those that don't have any power. Because my mother didn't have any power, my father didn't have any power, the people in McKees Rocks didn't. And sometimes people take advantage of it. Kind of what sometimes happens in Mansfield, hasn't it? Because it has never been really easy. It's always been something we have to work at here in Mansfield. But I want you to know that being a congressman, and I worked to balance a budget, you heard Pat Teaberry, our great friend and congressman, talking about it. The reason I wanted to balance the budget is because I knew when we balanced the budget, we'd have more success, more economic success. And we did, because when job creators know that the ground is safe, the ground is secure, they'll create jobs. And then coming into Ohio, the situation here was at 350,000 down. But I want to tell you what I really heard that really burned me up. I went to New York, and in New York they have the credit rating agencies. These are people that determine your credit worthiness. And you know what they told me? Ohio's dead. Oh, it's done. It's just, you know, there's no way to rebuild that state. And frankly, we're going to have to downgrade the credit. In other words, we're going to rip up your credit card and give you one where you can buy less. And we're going to keep an eye on you and watch you. And I looked at those folks, I'll never forget it, and I said, you just give me a little bit of time. Just give me a chance. Because nothing keeps Ohio down. Nothing. We have just missed the right formula. When I was first elected governor, that first year, remember? It was like, who is this guy? Who is this governor, right? I mean, what's he doing? But folks, in my lifetime, when you hire me, you're hiring a CEO. I'm not going to spend my time taking polls. I'm not going to spend my time having focus groups. And I'll tell you another thing. I'm not going to worry about being reelected, because it's my job to give everybody a chance to rise. Just like my mom and dad told me, make the world a little bit better place, Johnny, for the fact that you were there. And I remember that all my lifetime. If you talk to that congressman that was here, Teaberry, he'll tell you that he watched me do this all of my career, and one day he walked in to see me and he said, you know, I've caught the fever. I'm going to leave and I'm going to run for the legislature. And I thought to myself, he was such a valuable aide, such a valuable guy. I wish I hadn't taken him to my speeches, and he could still work here for a while. But I knew that it was the best thing. And then he became a congressman. Because I think doing the right things becomes contagious. Bringing people together becomes contagious. And so after that first year, we began to see the light. Some people thought that we needed to raise your taxes. That the way to get Ohio out of this mess was to just turn around and take more money out of your pocket. How would you like that? We could just keep taking it and spending it and taking it and spending it. I said, no. If you have a restaurant and you have no customers, you don't raise your prices, right? How about if you and I were partners and I said, hey, we got everybody coming to our restaurant, I got a great idea. Let's just raise the prices. How do you think that would go? So I said we have to cut the prices. We have to lower the taxes. We have to control the overhead. And frankly, we got to change the menu. So where are we today? Well, we were down those 350,000 jobs, and now we are up over 400,000 jobs, 400,000 families who are doing better in Ohio. Budget is balanced, and we were $8 billion in the hole, 20% of our operating budget, and now we have a $2 billion surplus, which sends a message all across America, and by the way, all across the world, that Ohio is open for business. And you remember those people in New York who told me that we were dead? They're singing a little different tune now, ladies and gentlemen, because they know Ohio's back. And they know we're growing, they know we're profitable, they know that we're rising. And I gotta tell you, how does this work? How does it work? Well, I mean, I've learned over the years exactly how it does work. You have to have common sense regulations. You know, the entities that employ us increasingly are the small businesses. Now, you know, Gorman Rupp's pretty good size, but I kind of think about them as a small business in a way. They certainly started that way, and they've grown and got stronger and stronger. But you ask Jeff Gorman, is he here? How do you like all those regulations, Jeff? Is that helping you out?
Get rid of them, John.
You know, I've been here before, but I was so proud to pull up here with that big GR Gorman Rupp pumps. Did you see how big it was? And all the people that come to work here, give him a great round of applause for what he and his family have done. So government comes in and pounds him. And they say, well, we got another rule, another regulation, another form, more red tape, more this, more hassle. Am I right, Jeff? And he calls me. I said, well, Jeff, I'm not president. He said, yeah, okay? But the fact is that we can regulate these folks to death. So, you know, I'll tell you what I propose. For 1 year, we're going to freeze all federal regulations except for health and safety so our small business people can flourish and hire our families, okay? Number one. Number two, Pat, any regulation more than $100 million, you're going to vote on it in the Congress, and if you don't like it, you'll reject it. Because the people that should make the laws are the ones who are elected, not the ones who are unelected that sit at their desks and try to tell us what to do out here. And I'll tell you, I have a vice president. I will have a vice president. I don't know if it'll be a man or a woman, but whoever it is, they're going to spend their time undoing all the regulations that are choking our ability to grow and have a strong economy and hire our family. And that's what they're going to do. Now they just go to funerals. I'll actually give the vice president something to do, okay? And I wanted to create a people's court. They told me, no, Judge Wapner already has a people's court. But I said, here's what I want to do. I want to have an independent entity that sits right next to the bureaucrats. So Jeff, you can go to somebody who's on your side, not going into the bureaucracy to get them to help you. We'll have somebody that'll fight for you. So Judge Wapner, move over, because we're coming to create a people's court in the federal government so we can be heard, the people. Now, let me talk a little bit about taxes. You know, our corporate taxes, you wonder why corporations are leaving America? Because their taxes are so darn high, and they can move their corporate headquarters somewhere else and cut their taxes in 3/4. What are we doing? We want these corporations to stay here. And then whenever they do leave and they make profits overseas, they pay taxes, and then we say, oh, well, when you come back to America, we'll tax you again. 40%. What do you think of that? How many times you want to pay taxes, ma'am? You probably don't want to pay them at all. I agree with you. But here's the fact. Let them bring their profits home and stop double taxing them, lower the corporate rate, and give Jeff Gorman an incentive to build more equipment in here so our workers can have more productivity and higher wages. Let's bring the corporations back to America. What's interesting, folks, is yesterday, was it yesterday? I can't remember. We were down in Dayton. You can't believe this. Well, you can believe it. You know how some of these candidates talk about how all the jobs are going to China? Well, down in Dayton, we were able to get the Chinese to invest $500 million in an old auto plant, and we have over 1,000 workers with it's gone on its way growing to 2,000 because we recruited them. And we told the Chinese, you start investing here. We're not going to tolerate you taking our stuff. We expect you to come here. And guess what? They're here in Dayton, Ohio, and helping 1,000 families be able to do well. So the corporate taxes have to come down. And how about if we just simplify our tax code and bring the rates down like Ronald Reagan did, okay? And by the way, was there ever a better couple than President Reagan and his wife, Nancy? You know what she did for him? She's a very smart woman. But she knew who was for her, Ronnie, and she knew who was against her, Ronnie. And let me tell you something. You didn't want to be on the list who was not for Ronnie, okay? You don't want to be on her list either, believe me, because she's my best supporter, and the woman I love to the ends of the earth, my wife Karen. And then finally, how about if we get a roadmap to a balanced budget? And let me tell you that included in that is to take the welfare programs and ship them back to Ohio so we don't have to ask permission of anybody in Washington to design a welfare program that does this. It helps those who can't help themselves, but begins to say to those who know how to help themselves that you need to do it, because it's a sin not to help people who need help, but it's equally a sin to continue to help somebody that needs to learn how to help themselves. Going to move education back here. We don't need anybody in Washington. They don't even know what the time zone is in Ohio to try to run our schools. Let's run our schools where we live, right at the school board level. And let me also tell you in that regard, these kids have to be trained for the jobs of today and tomorrow, not the jobs of yesterday. And we need to have an education system that gets kids excited about learning by giving them real-world experience. And I'm going to tell you, this company requires great precision. So you're a kid in school and you got a knack, a little young woman who's got a knack for math. Let her come out here and spend a few hours, 4 or 5 or 6 hours a week with Jeff Gorman. And let him tell her about how important math is in building this company. And see, all of a sudden it will come from something that's theoretical to something that's real. And she will get to see his home, his car, his family, and all of a sudden, the lights will go on. We need to turn our kids on in education. And that's why it's so important we bring the programs back here. And by the way, aren't you glad that we created vocational education in the 7th grade so that everybody doesn't have to have a future college? I don't know about you, but my plumber makes more than any lawyer I know. He's always at my house. But anyway, move education. We're going to move transportation and programs for the poor in healthcare. And also job training, so we can job train the people the way we know they should be in Ohio. Now, register all that. Federal regs, lower taxes, balanced budget. And I'm going to give you a couple more things to think about. You come home to America as a combat veteran and you're going to get health care anywhere you want it. You're not going to wait in line for somebody to give you permission to take care of yourself. And we all know this, but in Ohio, when you come home, if you drove a truck from Kandahar to Kabul, Afghanistan, we actually think you could probably drive a truck from Mansfield to Cleveland. We're not going to make you take a test to get a license. We're giving you your license. And we're going to encourage you to use that license. And we're going to give you credit at the colleges and the universities for what you did in the military. And let's face it, the VA has to be significantly changed and run by somebody who we all respect in America. And I will tell you this, at the end of the day, there should be no veteran who doesn't get health care, no veteran who is homeless, and no veteran who is unemployed in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, by the way, we're going to fix the border too. It's important for us to be able to control the border and get this issue behind us, so that we're not tearing each other apart here in this country. It's important to get that done. And for Social Security, we'll save it. We can save Social Security, and I'll tell you, we will have it so that 18-year-olds will also believe they have a better chance of seeing a Social Security check than a UFO by the time they retire, okay? Now, I have to go overseas and visit our friends and tell them that we will have their back. And we will rebuild our military because we need to have the strongest military on the face of the earth. Yeah. Now all these things I've just mentioned to you, they're going to be bundled up in a package that's going to be called shock and awe. And I will send this package to the United States Congress for approval in the first 100 days of a new administration. There will be no waiting. No waiting. And by the way, I'm going to collect the phone numbers of every mom and dad who has a son or daughter in Congress. I'm going to call mom on her birthday, and she's going to call her son or daughter who's in the Congress and say, don't you mess with that president. I like him. And let me tell you a couple other things. Number one, you want to solve these problems and get these jobs going. It's a moral purpose. Rebuild our military. I'll tell you how we get it done. I don't care whether we are Republicans or Democrats. The first thing we are is we're Americans, and we need to put being an American ahead of anything else. Before I take some questions, you know how you were all wondering when you watched some of those debates? How come they don't call on Kasich? You ever wonder that? Why doesn't he get any time? Why is it when I put on the news I never see him? You know why? Because I represent you. I represent Ohio. And I want you to know I will never take the low road to the highest office in the land. I will run a positive campaign. And I will will never create a toxic atmosphere where people show up at political events and fight with one another. Yeah. We need to bring our country together to solve these problems, and when we do, remembering that we are Americans before we're Republicans or Democrats, the rest of this century will be youthful and fresh and innovative and exciting. And these kids will look at us and they will thank us for what we've done. One final point. Hire me, I'll go be president. Okay? I'll get this agenda through. But you know, you don't really think, because I know you don't really think, that the spirit of our country depends on a president or a senator or a congressman or a legislator. You don't think that, do you? You know, when I grew up as a kid in Pittsburgh, our hero wasn't the president. Our hero was Roberto Clemente, the great baseball player who played right field. And I only saw my mother cry a couple times. And one of the times I saw her cry was when she came into my bedroom to tell me that Roberto Clemente had been killed in a plane crash on his way to Nicaragua to help people who were victims of an earthquake. You see, he was what we admired. Strong, excellent, fun, worked through injuries, complained once in a while, but just did everything he could possibly do. You see, the spirit of our country, it's in you, man. It's in me too when I live in Westerville next to my neighbors. It's in you. The spirit of our country is not in some politician that's going to come galloping into Mansfield to fix all of our problems. They should do their job. The spirit of our country is what we believe. What we believe. And I want to tell you that I believe that we were all given a purpose by the Lord. Some young people here today, tonight. In fact, a lot of young people are showing up at these rallies. You're made special. Did you know that? No one's ever been like you. Has anybody ever told you this? No one has ever been like you, and no one will ever be like you again. You're special. And you were put on this earth to do something special. You were put on this earth to be a source of good. You were put on this earth to live a life a little bit bigger than yourself. You were put on this earth to be a healer in whatever way you can, whether you become a teacher, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a doctor, or maybe when somebody's being bullied, you stand up for those kids that are being bullied and you invite them into the group. You see, we're never too old to change the world. We have to believe that, because that's what makes such a great difference in the spirit of our country. We have to believe that, and we want to believe it. And I believe that it's true. So I'll go ahead and take care of my job, and if I run into trouble, I'll call you. But let's lift the people of this community, of our neighborhoods, and let's strengthen our families, because that is where the spirit of America resides, in us. Do you agree? So let's go do it. Okay? Thank you. I did 106 of these in New Hampshire. I've done now, I think I'm up to over 200, and they've all been fun. So please don't screw this one up for me. Way in the back, young lady. Yeah, you. And if you come down and spin the wheel, and if it comes up right, you win a new car. It's right outside. It's Jeff Gorman's car.
Unlawfully deprived my son, Weston, of necessary autism therapy. We have been fighting the state of Ohio for 2 years at great financial, emotional, physical cost to our family. Ohio has spent tens of thousands of dollars to oppose us. The future of my son's life depends on these therapies. And I was wondering, does Ohio only help its own employees who have children with autism? Or does Ohio help all families of children who have autism? And this doesn't include the autism scholarship.
Well, let me say a couple things to you. You know, for the first time, you know, as you get economic growth, something I didn't mention, we want to make sure that we want to make sure, I don't know how these things work. Okay. The thing was smarter than me. We don't want to leave anybody behind. For the first time in the history of our state, families who have kids who are autistic can get health insurance. They weren't able to get it before. And so we want to make sure we get your name and your number, and we bring the help to you. Now, we've covered a heck of a lot more people in this state, and there's more work to do, and I'm convinced the legislature will complete the job. But it was Christmas about a year, maybe 2 years ago, when I called the lady who was the Joan of Arc fighting for this program of insurance for families, and we got it done. And I called her the week of Christmas. She said it's the best Christmas present I've ever had. So we are very sensitive to this, and if you're not being covered, I need to understand why. We'll get you covered. And I just got a beautiful email from a woman just a couple days ago that talked about the fact that her son was having trouble getting the assistance that he needed in the schools. He enrolled in an online school, and he is thriving. And she wrote me an email, a big email, about how much better her son was doing and how grateful that she was for all that. So let us get your name and figure this out. But look, we're not going to leave anybody behind. Not the men, and we're talking about autism. Separate that from mental illness, drug addiction, the working poor, the developmentally disabled. We want to make sure that your son is going to have a great life and that you don't have to bankrupt yourself to get this done. Nobody should have to go through that. Let's make sure that we get her, okay, they'll collect it up. Yes, sir, right here.
Dr. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, which says he's going to take care of everybody, all the little problems.
Well, we're going to be free. Everything's going to be free. Doesn't it sound great? Yeah, free.
1.5% that's going to pay for all this. I hope we can get them to do that, but how are you going to trust the national debt and stuff?
Well, first of all, if they're going to go with free stuff, then I'd like free golf, and I would like free Ben & Jerry's ice cream, you know? And, they're the big supporters of Bernie. Did you know that? And I like that New York fudge chunk. I can't have it we don't have to do this till after Lent is over, because I gave up ice cream. But then I want free stuff. Try it for a year, see how it works. Sir, when I was budget chairman, not only did we balance the budget, but we paid down $500 billion of the national debt. I don't see my debt clock here. I usually carry it around with me. It's not here tonight. But I will tell you, sir, that these numbers keep ticking up, ticking up, ticking up, ticking up. When I was there, the numbers actually came down. And we were growing jobs like crazy. There was no issue of income inequality, wage gap, or anything else. Things were cooking. And the reason why we don't balance a budget, you want me to tell you why? Well, it doesn't affect many people to balance the budget. It only affects farmers, doctors, students, veterans, seniors, teachers, nurses. It affects everybody. And what happens is we elect politicians. Let me have you think of it this way. How many of you were going to go to work on Monday and tell your boss that he or she is dead wrong and risk your losing your job? How many, come on, put your hands up. Let me see. Huh? Well, let me tell you something. What politicians are worried about is making their bosses angry. Because if there's one thing that a politician wants to be tomorrow, you know what it is? Elected, okay? So what you have to be able to do is resist the pressure from the special interest groups, which are all of us, to remember the big picture. Because if you are growing the economy and creating many jobs, you've achieved your goal. And what stops us is when people get weak. I'm going to tell you this. When I left Washington, sir, we had a projected $5 trillion surplus. Trillion. I came back to Westerville, and one of my buddies said, now that you and your buddies are gone, this thing's going to fall apart. I said, there's no way you could spend $5 trillion. You'd have to wake up every day and figure it out. They found a way. And you know who was in charge? The Republicans were in charge of everything. The House, the Senate, and the White House. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Democrats love to spend. Republicans love to spend. They just feel guilty when they do it. Now, we have a couple legislators here tonight. And I'm glad you're here, Dave, because I just noticed you, because you can ultimately talk to that woman about that autism, because we've made the biggest step, and we'll finish the job. But let me also tell you, he will tell you that he gets pounded on every day for more spending, right? And I'll tell you what I've told him. We didn't come this far to go backwards. We're a $2 billion surplus. And you know what that says to the businesses around this country? Ohio's open for business. I will not allow us to fritter away that surplus. But since I'm going to be president, I'm going to deal with not only the spending that's going up, but also over time to reduce that national debt, sir. I've done it before. That's why I want to go back and do it one more time. But I can't go back there without you.
Sir, if you become president, you have said several times that you will work across the aisle. The American people are very upset. They're mad. People are voting for Donald Trump. They're voting for Cruz. They're voting for this. They're voting for that. Okay. Now, we got rid of John Boehner because he was too much with Obama. Okay? We're all unhappy with Mitch McConnell because he was too much with Obama. Okay, now we got Paul Ryan, who wasn't going to pass the budget, and he passed the budget. Okay, now, how are we going to work across the aisle without giving away everything? And we always kowtow to the Democrats. Why don't the Republicans stop being wimps? You know, don't we have a majority? Well, I feel like everybody else. And people don't have the guts to say it, and I do. I'm running for president!
she's expressing the frustration that a lot of Republicans feel, but there's something deeper that's at work. And that is, we're worried about the security of our jobs. We're worried about the fact that our wages haven't gone up. We worry about the fact that we gave the bank our money, we didn't get a dime's worth of interest. And we're worried about all these things. And we're worried about, are people going to give away too much? Let me tell you, we won the majority in Congress. And some people wanted to make a deal to pass a phony budget. And I was involved in the government shutdown. I said, I didn't come all this way. I spent 10 years of my life to try to balance the budget. I wasn't about to cave at that point. See, we're back to my mother again, screaming at the radio. My mother was very smart. And she said, you stand up. I'm a Republican and I'm a conservative. The Republican Party is my vehicle, but not my master. My job is to be an independent voice, to see the problem and fix it no matter who's posing it. The government reopened, okay? What is your name? Myra. The government reopened. The Clinton administration came to see me. I said, I'll tell you, they said, you think we could try to work on this again? I said, I'll tell you what, I need entitlement reform. Will you give it to me? Yes. We have to have a real balanced budget. Would you give it to me? Yes. We have to cut taxes, not raise taxes. Will you do that? Because if you don't want to do it, there's no reason for us to talk. And you know what they said? Yes. And we cut the capital gains tax and we cut the family tax credit. How do you think we got the budget balanced? By goofing around and playing the old games? It went back once I left with a bunch of my buddies. And how about in Ohio? Can you see a better result than the growth of 400,000 jobs? We're one of the fastest growing states in America. And people people in other countries, the Germans, the Brits, the French, the Chinese, the Japanese. You see what Japan is doing, investing in Honda and bringing a lot of their operations from Mexico back to the United States where we are? Why? Because they're not legit. Now, let me also tell you, we're not going to demonize the other people. We don't live in a parliamentary system. We live in a system where it requires some negotiation. And you probably like Ronald Reagan, didn't you? Yeah. Guess who he negotiated with all the time? Tip O'Neill. And we solved a lot of problems. But I think what you raise, which is, if the Republicans win, are you going to cave and all that other stuff? The fact of the matter is, how do you cave on policy that you know is going to lead to economic growth? So there's no caving. But I have a lot of friends, when I was back in Congress, Democrats who voted with us. There were some Republicans that would never vote with us. But they only got them to vote with us, and we passed these things that were welfare reform, balancing budgets. I mean, unbelievable stuff. Stuff we wanted for 40 years. So the fact is, you got to remain strong. You have to remain firm. And these guys will tell you what it's like dealing with John Kasich, right, Dave? I mean, you got to be firm because you're the CEO and you cannot play games or politics. So, ma'am, all I can tell you is what I've just told you tonight, and if I'm not, I'll come back to Mansfield and do a town hall, and I'm President of the United States, and you can sit right up here. And if you don't like it, you can tell me, Myra, okay?